Hey everybody, it's the 25th of March, 2025. It's my son's half birthday. We love half birthdays. Halfway around the sun. We get together on Tuesdays at 12:30 UTC, just to work on projects that either people are bringing to this group right here, projects that are ongoing at Gimbalabs, or projects that are embedded in the Aiken PBL course. And we're going to touch each of those a little bit today. We made this agenda before we went live, and that's how we always start these sessions. Have a little conversation about where we've been and where we want to go next. And what we settled on is what you can see on my screen. Last week, Robin joined us and shared an idea for a validator he is bringing. We had a conversation about it, and I'll open this doc in just a second. And we're just going to kick it back to Robin for his latest thoughts on maybe the technical roadmap for this project. Then we're going to jump over to the Asteria team. We've got Newman and Andrew from that team here today. And we're going to take a quick look at one of, but maybe the central validator of the whole system, which is the space-time validator. And we thought we could just talk through all of the endpoints by reading the Aiken code, but trying to read it in such a way that tells the story that the user will be working through when they play this game. And then after we look at those two specific projects, we're going to review the Aiken PBL course by just getting like a final okay that the SLTs feel clear enough. And then we're going to make sure that each of those modules has a credential ready to be earned on the Andamio protocol. And we'll close out by looking at some of the implications of that. If we have time, we'll also look at the Aiken examples in the PPBL course, but this will be a nice thing to build on after we cover these other three things. So that's what we're going to jump into. Maybe I'll kick it straight to Robin because we've already aligned on this agenda. I'll just open up this doc and feel free to share screen if you want to. But you were mentioning right before we went live that you've been thinking about kind of the juicy part of this problem, this reclaim donation feature, and maybe starting by ignoring this feature for now and building the rest of it first and maybe this part later. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, kind of. I thought we could just leave it out for now and even accept this GoFundMe validated to be deployable or an okay way of using it without this. So if we imagine I set up a campaign and I'm asking for like 5,000 ADA, and then I have some donors and they are fully aware that if they donate, they will not get their money back in any case. So the implication of leaving this feature out is um, I send money to the contract, and even if the goal um, is not reached, no one will get their money back. But the owner of this campaign will always be able to access the money, maybe after a specific time that we define, or yeah, I guess the time has to be the time, I think. So yeah, it has this implication, I think. Mm, and I think it's something that, I mean, at least I could live with this. I think it's okay if people are aware of how the mechanics are. And then yeah, once this is at least once this is done, I think it makes sense to look into how to improve things and carry on from there. But I think it's a good start.
Adrian, what are you thinking?
Yeah, overall, I understand why you choose that path because it's just easier. But if you think about it, I don't think it even makes sense to have any validator involved in this. Would be enough to have just a wallet address where people can send data.
No validator.
Mhm.
Yeah, what would be I mean, I can imagine a few value props. I mean, it's as an experiment, it's kind of interesting, and we can still lock those funds so that they can only all be withdrawn at once and only after a deadline. So I could maybe argue that there's some nice auditability there.
Oh,
Yeah, it's a bit easier to communicate what is the purpose also if you have this validator, and it's also, for example, in the datum you have a short description of what it is.
Mhm.
Mm. Sorry, I should also raise my hands.
Oh, it's optional. It's great. Um,
I do agree that it is a good project for the start, but I think just for having data on chain, you can also use metadata, which is not which is cheaper.
Adrian, what if the campaign funds could only be unlocked after a deadline and if they were sent to a pre-specified project treasury on Andamio?
Yeah, sure, that's possible. But that would be also possible. So if it's just about the deadline, it would be possible with just native scripts.
You just sent, yeah, yeah. Oh, true. Right. Here, we're collecting here. Right, right. Well, so these are all examples. So this is a great, right, initial exercise. And this is an example of something we could even like assign in the course, giving it real utility is going to come from something like this. And this is an example, right? Like asking people who have time and want to hack at this problem, that might be interesting. And what I just named, right? The example of unlock only to Andamio validator um, treasury. That could be an interesting thing that like the Andamio team could put up a project for and give people a chance to play with that. So
If the access token could also solve the return funds to donor, because we would be possible to have the local state as the as the donor token or the donor follower.
that aligns with last week we talked about several different models.
Yeah, that would be the two
Right.
validator model.
This one. So Andamio is kind of built on this, and that might be right, just thinking about innovative ways to use the access token itself as a pre-built solution to a problem like this one. That might be interesting.
Top of my head, just thinking out loud. So I've got a question, which obviously related to this. So, is it possible to send? You create a transaction. Is it possible to? What the best way to word it? Like send two UTXOs to the same address, but depending on and then each one of those would have a different datum. So, like, take it. So say you've got this address that we want to donate funds to, and you'd have one UTXO which sort of holds the value, so holds the value of the campaign, and that you could commit a UTXO which so say you've got a thousand UTXO and that's all the donations, yeah, and then you send a transaction to it where you're committing 100. So then that UTXO gets spent, and now that UTXO is 1,100. But is it also possible in through some kind of validation where you could send another UTXO to the same address that maybe's got some sort of different datum in it that allows you to differentiate the two, and that UTXO is specific to that user and they get something back.
So you're describing like a two datum model with a
Yeah.
single address.
Yes.
And you would have one UTXO that could only be unlocked if somebody was adding funds to it.
Yeah.
Right. So I can unlock the 1,000 so that I can deposit it back with 1,100.
Yeah.
And then in the same transaction, in addition to unlocking and then relocking this fund UTXO, I would also deposit another UTXO with just a minimum amount of Lovelace and
Yes,
some datum that identifies something about my participation there.
exactly. Fair play to you, James, for actually getting that because I thought I was rambling. But that's exactly what I mean, yeah.
Adrian, did he sufficiently describe how Andamio works?
Not exactly, but some details of it.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's absolutely a big part. That's a major design pattern that we use in the system, right? You need to be able to have these UTXOs and those UTXOs. They serve different purposes. And you can imagine we're going to see some examples of this in the space-time validator, right? Depending on what I am locking at a validator address, I can include different datum, right? I can define different custom datum types for different UTXOs that are going to be locked. And as long as the datum is not too big, yes, you absolutely can add two such outputs to the same transaction.
Brilliant.
And you can validate between them, right? You can say, hey, this transaction is only going to work if there are two outputs back to this validator address, and if those outputs look like this. Right?
Yeah.
And what's nice about that, we all know that anybody can send any UTXO to any validator address, right? I can, and that's one way to like just mess with people's systems. You have to spend Lovelace to do it, but nothing's stopping us from just writing corrupt datum and sending it to somebody else's validator. One of the things that you just described that's kind of interesting, though, is for valid transactions, if we are requiring the unlocking and relocking of that fund UTXO, and then
Mm.
we only make that possible under certain conditions, you could see how nicely that would gate the ability to add at least certain kinds of UTXOs to that validator address because I'm validating even on deposit, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of a neat outcome. Yeah, I like the lock and relock pattern. It you don't always need to use it, right? But I do think there's some interesting stuff to play with there.
Okay, great.
That might be something to look at too in the course. Oops, unlock and relock pattern. Okay. Well, cool. So this is a starting place. We still have the notes from last week, and suffice to say, this is something I think anybody here could keep thinking about. Clearly, Robin's going to be thinking about it. And yeah, if anybody else wants to start running with this, just make sure to ping each other in Discord, or that's a conversation we can have here. Anybody else have any other thoughts about this project before we keep going?
Yeah, I'm wondering, is there an actual like validator written, or are you guys still at the like planning stage? Like a rough draft validator that we could see?
At this stage, this is an idea Robin has. I think Robin's working on it, but
Yeah, so far there's nothing online yet, and there's different approaches, right? So I'm actually considering maybe to set up some GitHub repo, following a new approach that I haven't even known of before I came here. So this parameterized validator I think is interesting because then every campaign has their own address. And yeah, I'm very new to Aiken. I haven't really as I said, I didn't even know about this parameterization of the validator. So um yeah, I need to read a bit more into that.
Yeah, I was just thinking it'd be cool to maybe in the future to to be able to go over it during one of these sessions and like dig in deeper with everyone.
I would certainly love that.
Absolutely. Yeah, anytime. And yeah, that's something that can be a future agenda item. We can jump in and look at those details. We could start writing it. Um, I'm starting to wonder, I might write a little draft of something for an upcoming open spaces for folks at Gimbalabs. Like what if Robin was to set up that repo and then he said, "Look, I'm gonna pledge 100 ADA to somebody who wants to like help out on this." What if Gimbal Labs matched that? Right? What if we said, "Oh, hey, if he's putting up 100, we'll put up 100 for somebody to work on that too." And the goal would be to have like a documented open source repo that anybody could then take and run with. Um, yeah, something to think about.
Awesome idea.
Yeah, I want to jump on this idea and lift it up because is this the first time that we've mentioned this? Because in my dream, in my 10-year dream of the way things work in 2035 with Gimbal Labs and this whole idea of matching funds
Mm,
and a smart contract that or some type of UTXO model like that we're using this and that's how our projects are. It just becomes like a really good pattern. And I would be interested in, you know, making projects that way because there's just a lot of things that I really like about it. It's something that my family did with me, and it just seems like it was a great thing. I don't know if your parents did that. It's like, oh, if you save
oh,
up and to
yes.
get your first car. I did. I remember working summer to get my first beater car, and it was all because my grandfather was like, if you if you I'll match whatever you put in, and I just think it's a really good way to support, um, and it could be really a tooling could be created that would make it. Yeah, I would think that's and is this the first time that we mentioned this? Because
I'm
it's
not sure.
definitely
I
something I
mean,
see.
yeah, I don't recall talking about it specifically, but it would feel really exciting in this case.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Write down the date, March 25th, 2025.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. All right, so yeah, something to think about, a proposal around cool systems to be built. And yeah, I agree. There's maybe this is the first task we put out there actually, but then could build from there. All right,
Mhm.
fun.
And just while we're talking about it, because this might be a good segue into the next thing about sort of natural language explanation of components of a Cardano uh, uh, Aiken project. I just posted in the chat, and Robin, please take a look at it. This is the design document for the Asteria project, and it basically explains the project in English and all the different components, and in there are um, the transactions, the UTXOs, the other components, but it explains it in English and with really good graphics. So those graphics are really wonderful for people to understand. And as an open source project, you've got all these contributors, different levels of experience and knowledge. It's a great way to help people build up that background knowledge and be able to communicate it with the different stakeholders, builders, helpers, etc. Um, I think it's the first one that I've seen, and I would love if other projects, if other people are doing this. This is a pattern that I would love to see replicated for all these projects, because it helps me develop a mental model of what's going on, and I've been really focused in on this in the Asteria project, and I think that's what we're about to do with the space-time validator, that sort of walking through and explaining a validator, one of the components of these systems. So yeah, just to highlight that, underline it.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I just skimmed through it and I think that's great. I would definitely try and set up something like that. I think it
Yeah,
makes
That's
even just the whiteboarding, like when Daniel Schiffman, somebody that I really like as a coding instructor. He's works here at NYU and does a project called Coding Train. And he starts at a whiteboard and he sketches out, and it's just such like an important part of engineering and collaboration and explanation and documentation. I just love the whiteboard. It's really my favorite part. So.
And now you could take a picture of your whiteboard, feed it to an LLM, and the LLM spits out a nice flow chart for you. So, right, we just
I'm doing a little dance as I'm dancing right now because that is true. Like they're not as good, which is great. They're kind of crappy, but it's kind of great. It's like you have a shitty dance partner and you're like, come on, you're stepping on my feet. And that's good. It's like,
draft. Yeah, at least
exactly.
Scaffolded the format of the document for me. I can go in here.
Yeah.
Things.
Yeah.
Well, this is really cool. So, I mean, this project is just like it's emerging naturally, right? Like the best projects are something that somebody wanted to do anyway, and it maybe gives us a chance to dig up some patterns over the next few weeks. Newman, I'd be pumped to work on that with you
Nice.
for this week, but yeah, maybe for next week we could have something. We're back to proposal mode. That is a great transition. Okay, so just adding a note here. This is, let me do it this way. So we talked about this one last week was the 18th, and we did some of this. And then we talked about this today. And I could make a table here. I probably will. We're probably overdue for that, but a list works for initial drafting. Possible first steps. Considering OS proposal for GL project. I'm just putting word soup. There he is.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on though. So now we get to look at some validator code and really practice this natural language piece that Newman was just naming. Andrew, Newman, do either of you want to share screen at this point and drive us through?
I can, yeah, I've got it open. Hang on a minute.
Oh, nice. Oh, and I do see that Harsha and Emmanuel are here.
Oh, yay. Hey, guys. Didn't see you guys. Snuck in.
Hey, snuck in.
Hey.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
Check in.
Check.
Right.
So what we thought we'd do here is a read through of the endpoints here in this Aiken code for the space-time validator, but really try to read them as if we are reading a front-end user interface. So where should we start?
Well, I mean, up there with the parameters and the constants, or loading in all the components, like all the things that we're doing. I mean, where should we start?
Yeah, they generate a lot of their own types, GXPipe team, but we probably don't.
Yeah. Oh, well, all that's under the hood, right? And some of those, like the datum types, we might need to investigate those in a little while if we find an endpoint that's using one of them. But what I would really recommend is jumping straight to the space-time validator, starts on line 2020, and then directly to the spending validator. Okay, so we have spacetime.spend. And when I think about the endpoints to a validator, I'm thinking about in a spending validator, each of its redeemers, right? Spacetime.spend.redeemer is the pattern that I think we should be using to organize how we talk about this. So where's the first redeemer inside of this spending validator? So we know it's called ship redeemer. Here we go.
I think there's a few actually.
Exactly.
Yeah, what?
Move ship, right? So spacetime.spend.move ship is the first one that we have to be able to now use natural language to describe.
Shouldn't we start with the minting?
Sure.
As you first have to mint a ship that you can move it.
Okay, so spacetime.mint.
Way
Dot,
down. There we go.
yeah. All right, and how many redeemer endpoints does this have? Well, it has mint ship. There it is. Are there any others?
Burn ship.
Okay. So I can mint a ship and I can burn a ship. When I'm playing this game, will I think of myself as minting a token?
You will receive a
No.
pilot token,
Yeah, that's true.
but the ship token stays in the validator address.
It's a little bit of a trick question in this case because this game was designed to help people understand how Cardano works, right? So maybe
Yeah.
we have a
Yeah,
special
yeah.
class of user who does want to know exactly what they've minted and where it's living now, right? But setting maybe that educational side piece aside, right? If I'm playing a game and really my end goal, I want to get to the middle of the game as fast as possible so I can claim the rewards in the middle.
Yeah.
So
Right.
what is the interface going to say when somebody mints a ship?
Hmm. Yeah, mint ship, get your pilot token, get a ship token, get a ship token, get a pilot token.
Yeah, well,
Um,
hopefully
No, you
something
don't
along the
script
lines of
the ship.
um, there'd be maybe a bit of a map where actually your ship appears on it, and then you will also have you will ask maybe um, point the user back to their own wallet to check that they've got their pilot token. Um, but yeah, I think a ship should appear on the screen somehow.
yeah. Mint ship.
Eventually, I'm going to have to sign a transaction.
Yeah, you'll be
Right.
prompted to sign a transaction.
And so that prompt, right? And this is one of the things you've seen the early growing pains of Ondamio. We still have like the names of our endpoints on buttons. I don't want to mint a treasury token. I want to manage a project, right? Or I don't want to burn a course. I want to unenroll,
Right.
earn a credential, that kind
Right.
of thing.
Right.
And so this prompt here, this is so important, right? So like, yes, you're entering this game. You are a pilot. Now you need a ship, right? Well, you don't have one yet. So here's the story. Press this button to mint one. And then depending on the amount you want to teach people about how Cardano works, you can show them the outputs to that transaction or not. And I think it's kind of interesting to like think of both cases at the same time, right? Just like the smoothest playing experience and kind of the annotated learning experience.
Yeah. So learners and players, and I like that terminology and annotated. Uh, yeah. Um, and it could, this is sort of daydreamy, but it could be that there's a toggle switch that says, you know, how much information do you want behind the scenes? Like, if you're learning Cardano, you want to be a Cardano developer. Okay, we're assuming that's what they want. But if you just want a smooth gameplay and you just want to play the game, or you are at a different level, I've seen tutorials where they have like three different levels of explanation, and they're like, okay, if you're just learning, this is what you need to know. It's more, stripped down, simplified. But if you're an advanced, then you get a little more detail and a little more behind the scenes. Um, that may be just sort of a daydream or a wish list, but certainly the front end could take into account the the learning goals of the project of playing the game, which is to understand the UTXO model and the Aiken mesh. Possibly T3 app. Uh, you know, um, yeah, student learning targets, to help people practice what they've learned in a course.
I think that's a really nice idea, Newman. It would add some levels to the game and make it educational for those also that want to learn more, like you were saying.
And it might explain it because I think the gameplay is going to be pretty simple. It's going to be pretty silly game if, as far as if people didn't understand that this is to learn like the what's going on behind the scenes, like looking under the hood. So the ability to look under the hood and explain that would, I think, make a big difference. Yeah. Yeah, annotated gameplay.
One interesting option you have for the future as well. Remember that in order for somebody to play the game in the UI, you have to upload the config variables to the front end project, right? It's possible to create an instance of the game where you hide a whole bunch of those variables and you only display the current state of the game, and you require people to build the transactions by some other method than your UI. For example, by building the transactions with Cardano CLI, right? And I could imagine that as a really interesting learning experience, right? Hey, you're going to see the results in this friendly game board, but the way you get your ship to move around the screen is by working through these transactions in this course module.
Yeah. We've never actually played the game, so we don't
That's down the road,
don't
yeah.
have we've never actually played the
Or
game,
or
which
it's
which
not.
I'm which
Maybe you want to build that visualization of current state first and then run some transactions and make sure that the current state updates. That might actually be an interesting dev pathway for you guys.
I
yeah.
wanted to add something, but I see Adrian has his hand up, so maybe you want to go before?
Uh,
Sometimes Adrian's hand just stays up.
Never lowered my hand, sorry.
It's a tired hand.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah,
Um,
I was just thinking along those lines that it could be cool also to include some kind of like Easter egg or maybe there's some kind of move or space if someone enters or does something and then that could be a whole other option.
I mean, mods just open themselves up, right? That's
yeah.
that's a whole this there's a 6 year long roadmap of fun things to add, which is really cool.
So there's this great, I'm spacing the name of, but there's a great novel, science fiction novel by Andy Weir, the guy who did The Martian, or something, or Mars something. But it's basically a guy that just randomly wakes up and he has to figure out, he's just in a room and he has to figure out that he's in a spaceship and he has to learn how to fly the ship and stuff like that. You could do like, you know, Andy Weir sci-fi now. I wish the way back or something. I don't know. I can't remember the name of it, but you could do it in that play mode where you just have to figure out like where you are, what you are, and how to operate the ship. Um, but I think there is definitely like there's two phases of the game, like setting up the game and I like to think of it as the game master, like in a Dungeons and Dragons type of model. Uh, tabletop role playing game model where the administrator, sets up the game and runs the game, and then the players, are protected by a screen so they can't see it according to like their goal. Like, are they just there to play the game, or are they wanting to become game masters? That could be the metaphor. Just like, oh yeah, you want to, and just don't call them devs. You could call them game masters, but we could be getting a little too English language. I suggest let's jump back
Yeah.
into the.
Well, so we've got minting and burning a ship, and I think it's sufficient to agree that the buttons are going to have to say something to do these two
Yeah.
actions, right? And there's some other stuff that's created when you do mint that ship, right? Is there an output on the mint ship transaction that has like any datum on it or anything? Mint ship.
You've got outputs. Is that where we're looking?
The transaction will have outputs, right? Okay. And so line 302. Yeah. So in the outputs to this transaction, we're expecting some ship state, right?
That would be the counter, possibly. Because
Okay. Yeah. What's on it? What's on that ship state datum? So this is where then we can look at, okay, the ship datum. What's the type of that?
so we've got byte array concatenated because we're adding an integer to it every time it's minted, I think.
Mhm.
Uh, I guess this is the logic here. I have seen that in the off-chain code.
So where is this datum coming from? Like, is there datum in this in the signature for this minting endpoint in the first place?
Do you want me to have a look at the off-chain?
Just no, stay right here. Stay right here. Look at find the beginning of the mint section of this redeemer. It's just a few lines above, right? Right. So we've got a minting uh, validator on line 274, right? To a minting redeemer, we always pass these three props: a redeemer. Oh, sorry. Yeah. The redeemer, the policy ID that it's going to be creating, and the transaction in which it's happening. But notice we don't see datum right there. And so think about the interactive nature of this minting transaction. You don't include datum directly in the minting validator itself, but you can optionally reference it. And the way we're doing that is by looking at an input and an output to this transaction and expecting that those inputs and outputs have the datum as specified in this minting validator. Does that part track?
Yeah, that makes sense. That's technical stuff. Good
But
thinking.
yeah,
Right?
so the
I can have a lot of inputs and a lot of outputs as UTXOs to a transaction. Those may or may not have datum, but it's possible, like you see right here, to write minting rules based on that datum existing and having a certain form.
so
That's
help me list list dot find 283. So or 282 area input list, and basically what I'm thinking this does. How do you we explain that in English? So it's looking through all of the inputs or input dot output dot address. My brain's like vapor
Okay,
locked.
okay, watch this. So we have
Yeah,
list.find on line 283,
right.
right? This find function, and we could look this up in the docs as well, but just to stay right here, this find function takes two parameters. First is the list of inputs that you can see on line 284.
Okay.
And
270.
second is a function that's written on lines 285 through 291. You can think of this function as the filtering function, right? I'm going to find things in this list of inputs. Which things am I going to find? Things that satisfy lines 285 through 291.
Okay. Payment credentials.
Okay.
Verification key is script.
So
Takes
iterate
in a
over all the inputs and find the ones that have an output, right? The basically the value, XO,
okay.
right? Remember
I
that an
got it.
input is an output, which is what we call a UTXO, and
Yep.
some reference to that output, just the transaction hash and index, right? So in other words, on line 286, we could read that find a UTXO in the inputs where the address has a payment credential. What kind of payment credential
I got
must
you.
it have?
Yeah. 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 The 289, the Astera validator address.
Right.
That yeah. Yeah.
So in other words, if the input is just from 287, somebody's payment key, ignore it.
Right.
Only consider input UTXOs from a script address. And not only that, they must be from this script address. Which one? The Asteria validator address.
Yep. Okay.
Right? Now, go back to line 282. The result of a list.find is either going to be a successful find or it's not, right?
Okay.
Find strawberries in this list of fruits, right? Strawberries will either be in my list of fruits or it won't be.
Okay.
So line 282 has two very important keywords that you're going to see over and over again in Aiken code, expect and sum,
Right.
right? Expect is essentially
Ah.
the variable assignment that crashes the validator if it's not satisfied. So like in JavaScript, I could write const asteria input equals list.find, and I could find some input, right? And I would save that as a constant. And then later in my JavaScript application, I might check to see that the value of this const has the value I want. Because it's not on-chain code, it's cheap to check things like that. But Aiken is different. We say, look, yeah, we do want const asteria input, but if we don't have it, there's no reason to run any other calculations. Don't even use that expensive bandwidth. Just stop. That's what the expect word does. The
So
expect,
it doesn't, yeah.
go ahead.
Well, at 282, so that expect is if it doesn't succeed, I mean, is this another one of those Boolean
I think
sort
it's
of
let's look at the docs for list.find now. Andrew, can you quickly get to the Aiken standard library docs?
and then yeah, so it's and then you can see that down once it's I mean, what okay, so but at 293, then it says, look, if we've got one of those admin policy name is greater than 0. So if you've got one of these
Right.
input
And
output
and a
situation.
let is more like a const, right? Let is like here, assign this variable and whatever
Yeah,
you
yeah,
find, just keep going.
yeah.
But what you'll see in the docs, right? A find function either returns some of something or it returns none. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. And so that's what we have here. List.find. I'm either going to find some Asteria input or I'm going to find none. What do we expect? We expect some. If you don't find it, stop.
Okay.
Hang on, I'm just changing. Oh yeah. Oh, no. Can you see that now?
There it is. Yep. So let's look for list.find.
Think looking for just find would be enough. Yeah.
Right. And here you can see,
Find.
what does find return? It returns an option A, right? Option is either some or none. And the A is provided here. That's just showing us the type that A would have to be. So in the example just below, find 1, 2, 3, A would be a number. But it could be a custom datum. It could be a byte string.
Okay.
And so, Andrew, you see, the most important thing we see here is where it says sum2 in the example, right? Because this is where we really get to understand the concept of pattern matching, right? The entire expect keyword, what it's trying to do is not only does it say this variable must exist, it's the way we're saying that essentially is by matching on the pattern sum A. Okay. So in other words, we say, hey, expect this thing. And if we've got it, this gives us a mechanism for writing really concise code, right? If it exists, the variable is already assigned.
Okay. We happy there? Should we go back?
Yeah, we can toggle back and forth, right?
Yeah.
So now we've got, okay, expect some. And I think the hardest thing about pattern matching is that it feels like magic until you get it, right? But basically line 282, if it does succeed, now asteria underscore input is just a variable name that we can reference like any other variable name. And we do farther down in the code. There it is, right? If we ever get to line 295, we know that asteria underscore input exists and has the type we expect. Because if it doesn't, we don't get past line 282.
Okay. Fog is lifting a little bit.
So
Sure.
that's only talking about inputs. Now we do the same thing on line 299, but for datums. Excuse me, for outputs, right? For output datums. Oh, no, we don't. That's still the input datum. 299 is the input datum. Okay. And then down, where is it? A little farther down here, 304 is using datum from ship state, which is an output. But that's
Right. And it does, yeah, it does ship state on 302. Is that the
right.
same pattern?
Right. Yeah. So 299 and 300 are handling the incoming datum, and they're calling it asteria datum. And then lines 302 through 306 are handling outgoing datum. And I shouldn't say handling, I should say checking against, right? All a validator doesn't handle, it doesn't change state. All it can do is say, yes, that's a valid transition.
Why is it in square brackets?
Well, let's go to the docs and find out. So transaction.find script outputs. Can you find that in the docs?
Transaction. Let's go to that.
Find script outputs. And it's going to be a method on that constructor. It's not going to be an element of the record itself. Just search for find script. Oh, there it is. You can see it in your sidebar too.
Find data. Find.
Find script outputs. So what's the return type of this?
A list.
So that's why we have the brackets.
Yeah.
But we're doing some pattern matching. Go back to the code and look at the pattern we're trying to match. So line 302 says, look, how many such script outputs must we find? One and only one. Line 303 says, take the transaction and find the script outputs. Find from the list of outputs one that has shipyard policy, right? That's line 303. Now, find script outputs can return a list, But we don't want a list unless it has exactly one item in it. That's what line 302 says. And the pattern matching part is that we're just able to put the brackets around now the name that the thing is going to have if it's successfully found.
Ship state.
Right. Yep. If transaction dot find script outputs returns exactly one UTXO, call it ship
Okay.
state and keep going. And then use it on line 304.
Does there need to be an expect if we've already
Okay. So what is the type of ship state?
Hmm.
shipped datum?
Search.
No, not
Ah,
yet. What's the type returned by find script outputs?
an inline datum.
Not yet. Go back to the doc.
Yeah.
Just toggle back to the Aiken docs for find script outputs, right? Find script outputs returns a list of outputs. So that means the type, if you go back to the code of ship state, is an output, which makes
Yeah.
sense because we found it in a list of outputs.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So now, if we get to line 304, we know we have an output, but we don't know yet if that output has datum in it.
Right.
So on line 304, we check A, does it have datum? And B, is that inline datum? And if it does, we're going to call that ship datum.
Okay.
Then on line 305, we go one step further. We say, well, if you got to this line, we know it's inline datum. Now check that it precisely matches the type ship datum.
Ah, okay. Which is we've got types on there. Should we try and find that?
Yeah, that might be interesting.
Uh, where did we keep the types?
It's in library right above
Right
on
above the
chain.
utils down. Oh,
Utils?
No,
right
library,
above it.
lib under build in source.
Thank you.
There it is.
There we go.
Oh, it's looking a little more.
Okay. So in plain language, you can't mint a ship unless you provide some datum like this in a ship output. That's cool,
Yeah.
right? You can't join this team if you don't know the rules for joining this team, right? You can't play this game if you're not setting up a ship that's not built like this. Now, of course, that's the message to the dev though, not to the end user, right? The UX just needs to provide this datum or else it will fail.
Well, okay. So this allow me to pull up on the yoke and pull the frame a little bit higher because this gets us to those headless DApp pattern. Like if you have a alternative UX that creates this ship datum in this exact type, like if it's like an open type, what do they call that? Open data, open, so it's just,
Like
it'll
it's
pass
an
that part of the,
API specification.
it's an API thing. Yeah, exactly. So it's just like, yeah, if it passes this and it's sort of like in Star Wars, it's an older code, but I was allowing it. When they try to sneak down to Endor. To further blow up any other brain parts, the it's like that analogy of like, hey, which game are you playing? It's like you show up with a soccer ball, you can play soccer. But if you have a football and your friends are playing soccer, you know, even if they do let you play, you're not going to get far because this is not going to work. Kick a football goes a different way than you kick a soccer ball. So So this is, yeah, this is the tests, the Boolean uh, logic gates around it. And so now we found a ship datum in that input output um, datum, and then yeah, okay. So it's fitting a bit. So yeah, right. So now the next one on 306, or
Right.
does that make sense to
So
everybody?
now a whole bunch of action. Yes, exactly. And this is you're talking about the interface, right? And there's different
Yeah,
there's the interface from the blockchain to the dev, and there's the interface from the dev to the end user, and there's a bunch of other interfaces probably in between, right?
right.
But this is even if we were talking about a Web 2 API, if I'm making a post request to an API, it's going to reject malformed data.
Yeah, malform
So
data. Right. This is basically,
that pattern
yeah,
is fine, right?
yeah.
And so that's why I think it's really helpful to again think of these as endpoints. We're looking at the space-time dot mint ship endpoint in the API that we're building out from this set of validators.
API from this set of validators. Yeah.
Now, lines 308 down past the bottom of the screen, I see a whole bunch of let statements. And what that says to me is that we're about to unleash a whole wave of logic, right? That's going to be non-blocking. I don't see any more expect statements. So we make all the
Okay.
expect statements. We say, well, don't even do all the interesting stuff until we're sure that there's an input datum that looks like this, there's an output datum that looks like this, and line 306, we are within time bounds. A validity range, upper bound, bound type, TX list, right? Like I'm not going to try to, I need to look at the docs to remember. This always bends my brain to think about time. But I'm assuming that basically says only do it before a certain deadline,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So if we have the input datum, if we have the output datum, if we are within bounds with regards to time, now, okay, it's worth it to spend some processing power to run lines 308, at least until the next expect statement.
Right. Which is three. I mean, if you scroll down, Andrew, how far down does it go with all these let statements? Okay. And then they get to this 337, which is the and,
Yeah.
which is like a final check. So what I'm seeing there is the like 338 must underscore be underscore valid underscore Aseri, and then the question mark, which is to deal with the optionality of it.
Exactly, right. And the question mark adds logging for you. Okay. So, and
Oh,
that's
that's what
cover
that
that in the
is.
course. Yeah. So
Okay, okay.
basically, this is just saying, here's all the things. Now that we've checked the trivial stuff, like whether the data has the proper format, now we can make meaningful comparisons on what we know is at least valid data to make sure that it's meeting the unique constraints. This is our business logic, right? And it's like if somebody says, "Tell me about a baseball game by giving me the box score to a football game." I'm like, I can't. I just that your question doesn't
Right.
make sense, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if you give me the
Thank you.
box score to a baseball game and you tell me to tell you about the baseball game, I can tell you a story about it. So
Thank
that's
you for that. Thank you for that analogy. That helps me tremendously, actually.
so now, right, we're looking starting on line 308, we are looking at the correct box score.
Yeah.
And now we're just trying to figure out, well, is everything right? Is the name of the ship correct? Is the name of the pilot correct? Are we minting the correct amount of value on line 318 and 323? Are we respecting minimum distance? Right now, that's going really, now we're not even talking about on-chain value. Now we're talking very specifically about the Asteria case, but that's fine, right? They built additional helper functions to respect distance, must have ship name, must have pilot name, right? These are all things that are going to be true or false within the bounds of correctly formed data. And so all we do is we assign each of these values. Most of them are Boolean. And all of the ones that are Boolean, those are the ones that are named in the return statement at the bottom. So for example, must mint expected value. That's going to be true or false. And that's why we see it.
319. Yeah.
Yeah.
319, 319. Line 319. Andrew. Yeah, there you go.
I think this is really clever though,
Yeah.
because the ship counter is actually held in the Asteria datum, which we check here, and then it's checking that they've put that
Well,
the counter that an additional integer has been added onto the ship name. So
Okay. So now, okay, in plain language, what is Asteria datum keeping track of?
the amount of ships that have been minted.
Bingo, right? So there's back at our basically now in our space-time validator, there's kind of a master UTXO that's keeping track of general game state. Nobody can take that UTXO and run away with it, but they can do what Andrew was describing earlier. They can unlock that UTXO and they can relock it if and only if they're incrementing the number of ships by one.
and that's the ship state UTXO. We're in the space
Okay, wait a
time.
minute. Now this gets interesting. We're talking about minting, but is there a related spending endpoint that allows me to unlock and then relock the Asteria datum? Same validator, but go to the spending endpoints and see if you can find a redeemer that corresponds to this.
It's not going to move ship. Spend.
That would be the move ship, no?
Yeah.
What?
Uh,
Um,
would
no.
any time you need to change that, it might happen in more
Wait.
than
So
Well, I see move ship. No, that's not the same thing as minting a ship, is it?
No, no, it's not. It's not.
No. Okay, so it's not that one. So just collapse that one, right?
There you go. Yes,
Not
sir.
not
Yes,
all the
sir.
redeemers. Collapse line 69.
yeah.
Okay, the next one, gather fuel. Is that the same thing as minting a ship? No, no, collapse
No,
it.
no.
What's next? Mine Asteria. That's the win condition. That's not the same
Yeah.
thing as minting a ship. Quit. Is that the same thing as minting a ship?
It's burning a ship.
That's
Oh
burn.
no. Okay. So, oh wait. Okay. So there is a spending endpoint that corresponds to a minting endpoint. That's pretty interesting. But none of these are the endpoint we are looking for. Where is it? Where's the spending redeemer endpoint that's going to allow
Oh, here we
me
go.
to increment the ship count? It's not in this file.
It's in Asteria.
Well, yeah. Is it not in the shipyard one, just a little bit farther down in us in space time?
No, because the dart it's referring to the datum in Asteria.ak,
Ah,
isn't it? Yeah, here.
That looks maybe like the logic we're talking about. What's the name of that endpoint
scroll
that it's
scroll
inside?
up. Yeah,
Add new ship.
Oh,
there
would
it
that
is.
maybe court? Yes, of course. Okay, so now you can see here is the spending logic that allows us to unlock and relock. And this logic must be satisfied in order to mint a new ship. So now we're talking about asteria.spend.add new ship. It's a spending endpoint from this validator over here. And you can see the one-to-one relationship between this endpoint and spacetime.mint.newship.
Uh,
And once
what?
you see these two validators can only work together,
That's right. Yeah.
right? I can only mint if this spending condition is also met. Is there something that forces the minting condition to be checked?
It's in the parameters, isn't it? I think we have no, maybe I'm talking. Oh, in space-time, it's parameterized on the stereo validator address.
It is, yep. So that's where we're getting the address of the Asteria input and output, right? And remember, this minting policy, it just says, look, to this address, you must have unlocked a token with this ship count, and you must send back a UTXO that has an incremented ship count. The way to do that is over here in this Asteria spending endpoint. So that makes a clear connection. I'm just wondering if add new ship can only work if a token is minted. Anything about minting in this endpoint? There may or may not be. Must preserve minting policy. That's good. And it's not going to be, it's all going to be in the endpoint we were just looking at. So inside of add new ship, increment counter, shipyard policy. Okay, so it's getting the shipyard policy from this datum, and it's not allowing us to change it. But there's nothing that says, oh, shipment lovelace fee. Anybody? I don't see. So no, I don't see anything that says add new ship requires a ship to be minted.
So what about that increment counter? So there's the because we when we mint a ship over in space time, we count we also increment or we use that counter. Maybe is that it? Search and find Asteria output datum ship counter over in space time. Or look up. It's gonna be down in the shipyard policy section, mint ship right there, and then line maybe down there. Yeah, 308. So Asteria datum ship counter. Is that the same?
That's just checking that the datum. So when you create a transaction, you're spending two UTXOs. That's the only way it can work is that you're sending a UTXO to Asteria and a UTXO to spacetime. So it's checking that the datum that you're sending to Asteria uh,
Well,
matches um, the minting condition that of the UTXO you're sending to spacetime, if that makes sense. I think that's how it is.
so that gets me down to this, and I actually had this question earlier. I'm thinking that let and the concatenate, like that's writing a a ship token name. That's creating that variable, and it comes
It,
from
on the Asteria datum.
So yeah, what's an example of a ship token name?
Ship 01.
Exactly.
yeah.
Right. So it's just capital ship with a number concatenated on the end. The
Yeah,
number
you
going
can't specify your own ship name. Well, maybe there
exact.
maybe there's a different thing you
No, no,
can,
no.
but
You get yeah, when you mint a ship and you mint a pilot, you get the next counter.
Yeah.
And they will always match, right? So ship and pilot tokens are minted in pairs,
yeah.
so they will correspond moving forward. And that's the other thing this does for us.
And the ship token goes back to the validator address while the pilot token goes to the user.
So okay. If if I'm now going just to like just natural language as much as possible, if I'm a driver and I buy a car, when I buy the car, do they say here you can have this car and you can have this driver for the car?
Well, they say that you're the driver for the car.
Oh, so what do they
Um,
don't give me a pilot for my spaceship. What do they give me?
that's, uh,
They give you a key
Maybe
to move
yeah,
the car.
I don't want a pilot. I want a key. So here is an example. They're using the word pilot. That's the token that's going to go into your wallet. But maybe you would want to view that pilot token as the key to your spaceship, right? You as the user must connect your wallet with this pilot token in it, and that pilot token is the key to your spaceship.
right, right.
And this is so, right? Sure, there's one word in the validator. Do you have to use that word in the front end?
No,
No.
but it'll yeah. I was wondering because will that break our endpoint? I mean, you could change it and just say, hey, it's somewhere else, so it could be obfuscated or it can be sort of in the background. It's just we can call it a different thing, but
Or
um,
maybe I do get a pilot, right? Maybe the pilot has a little PFP of my flyer, and I do have a cute little token with a picture of a pilot in my wallet.
yeah,
I have to drop
yeah.
my pilot into the spaceship to play.
Yeah, and that sort of makes in the analogy, it's just like you get a ship with a pilot and you control the pilot. Yeah, but I get
Your
it. Yeah,
pilot is a little Lego man that you keep in your
yeah,
wallet.
yeah, exactly. But this pilot goes with this ship.
Yes, this pilot only knows
That's
how to fly this ship.
yeah. He's a stupid pilot. He's a great pilot.
Don't lose your pilot. He only knows how to fly this one.
I guess that checks that in the move ship if we were to go up to move.
Yeah, I
So
am. I am mindful of the time. Wow, look at that.
This is so fun. I hope this has felt productive for folks. This is my favorite kind of live coding when we just get to like look for something like this. So thanks for
This
doing it.
I it, I want to blame it on just like a kind of a racy morning and the cat threw up and and I'm like, what the fuck? I just I do feel I do feel somewhat stupid, when to not to put too fine a point on it. I'm like, I mean, am I still just reading this? Feels sometimes I feel like I'm champion, sometimes I feel like a beginner, but yeah,
I
it's
think
little steps.
I think these validators are pretty advanced and there's some real brain twisting going on there. And I think they've, well, maybe not
Yeah,
involved new concepts, but I think it's perfectly acceptable to say you can spend a few hours looking at it, trying to get your head around it.
yeah,
It's good
yeah,
code. It's a dense, right? We're not reading a grocery store paperback, right? We're reading dense poetry, and you got to unpack line
yeah,
by line, and it's
yeah,
doable. But all code, no matter how skilled you are, looks like a wall of text when you first look at
yeah.
it, right?
When you first look at it, yeah,
And then you start digging in piece by piece. It's really important. I'm glad we emphasized the word expect a little bit today, right? That pattern and really understanding the power of pattern matching, that part is so important, right? So if this gives you a chance to practice that, try to continue to do that as you read the other validators and really highlight, right? Look for that word expect. Think about what it's blocking and why in each one of those. And you'll start to accelerate through each of them.
love it. I hear the bells ringing. If
That was
that means
fun.
anything,
Yeah,
yep.
y'all. Well, thanks for joining us today. We got through you're probably about the same proportion of our agenda as last week. So another good day in live coding land. Thanks for hanging out today. We've got All Things Go with Professor Mix coming up tomorrow at 14:30 UTC. That's on Wednesdays. And Thursdays at 14 UTC is, or sorry, 14:30 UTC is Gimbalabs Governance. Always check gimbalabs.com/calendar. It's up to date with Zoom links, and especially if I say the wrong time in a meeting, don't listen to that. Just look at the calendar for a source of truth. All right, y'all. Thanks for hanging out, and see you soon.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
All right.